time now for the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. And now, here she is, the smart, the sexy, the savvy, divine Miss C.
And welcome to today's show. Today I'm going to do a very special show because as a musician myself, I love to have great musicians on my show, and we're going to do a Masters and Legends music special today. If you love big band, you definitely want to stay tuned because my guest today is clarinetist and saxophonist Terry Myers. Now, he's the band leader of the Tommy Dorsey Band. And Terry, I want to thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Laurie.
Thank you. I want to start a little bit with your life history. Terry, tell me about your love of music from childhood.
You know, it's kind of funny because from the as long as I can remember, I was always entranced by any music I heard. I don't know that I was always totally aware of that fixation, but I was actually born on a farm in the state of Iowa, which is about as far removed from the music scene as you can possibly imagine. But my father, who was a truck driver and farmer, recognized very early in me to the point when I was told later on that from the time I was 2 or 3 years old that he would tell anybody who would stop and listen, he'd say, "See that kid? He's going to be a musician." And they would ask why, and he'd say, "Well, you know, his mom's family is full of musicians, and it's obvious that he's totally into any music he hears." And the first music I ever remember hearing live was a country western band playing square dance music, you know, in a Oddfellows Hall someplace in southeast Iowa. And I just remember standing in front of that band, and I probably stood there all night, you know, just absolutely mesmerized by somebody making music. And when I was in fourth grade, my fourth grade teacher had us all learn to play little recorders, or tonettes they were called.
I remember those, Terry.
And, you know, that was invaluable because a couple years later we moved into the city of Des Moines. And again, my dad was telling people with whom he was working, you know, I have this kid that's going to be a musician, but I don't have an instrument for him to play. And we were, you know, pretty poor financially at that time. And one of his fellow workers said, "Well, you know, my daughter played alto sax in high school, and it's just been sitting in the closet for years. You could take that home, and maybe he could try it, and if he sticks with it, you could save up and get him a better horn." So I always remember, and we were a family of 5, and we were living in a 27 by 8-foot trailer. And
Wow.
My dad came walking down the driveway with that saxophone, and it was all beat up, but it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I picked it up, and within about 5 minutes, as soon as I could make a sound on it, I remember playing the Tennessee Waltz. That was real popular at that time. This was in early 1951. And, you know, I just instantly started playing songs on it. And it was really because I had played that tonette and had learned some semblance of chromatic fingering. And you know, I've often wondered what I would have done if he'd have brought home a trombone. I don't know if that would have worked so well. But, you know, it was from the very beginning. And within about, I was still 10 years old. Within 2 years, I started to play professionally with some other young players. And so here I was 12 years old and going out and make my part-time job was playing music and getting paid for it. I just didn't think there was anything quite like that. And I still wonder to this day how that happened, but I'm thankful it did.
You know, now it sounds like you were pretty much born into doing it. Did you ever work anything as far as a professional job besides music?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I did. You know, it's kind of interesting because I graduated from high school in Des Moines, and I went to Drake University, which is a great school, and it has a wonderful music department. So I was going to major in music education, and I found out I had to be in the marching band. And, I kind of had this basic tenet that playing music and marching while you're doing it is almost sacrilege. I couldn't believe that anybody would want to do this. And I thought, is this what I'm training for? I'm going to teach people to do this? I don't think so. So I changed my major to physical education because I'd always loved to play sports. And I graduated in 1961 from Drake, and I went out in the state of Iowa as a football and basketball and track coach. And I played baseball in college. And then after I got out of college, I played fast-pitch softball for the Schlitz Brewing Company, and was coaching high school sports and playing golf 4 or 5 days a week. And I was really into athletics, but all this while, I still kept playing music, even though I was kind of a weekend warrior during those years. And I did that for 11 years, and the last 3 years of my coaching career, I was also a high school principal. And then in 1972, I decided I had taken my last team to the state tournament, and I really felt like it was time to, we got to the Sweet 16, which is pretty good. I really thought, I've been out in the summers traveling around playing shows with all kinds of different national acts. And the professional musicians I was working with kept saying, why aren't you doing this full time? So I thought, I'm going to do it because I'm 32 years old, and I'm thinking ahead to the time when I was going to hit the ripe old age of 50 and be very frustrated if I didn't give it a shot. And I thought my reasoning was I have a master's degree in education. I could always come back. Well, I never went back. I've been a professional musician ever since. But, I did have another career. And I have to say I really have some great memories from my days of coaching and teaching. But I'm so thankful that I finally saw the light and went into music full time.
Yeah, very interesting story. And Terry, what I want to do is we're gonna play an audio clip. So hold on for just a second.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Now, that was great, Terry. Tell us a little bit about that audio clip.
Well, that's a great arrangement of Flying Home, which my friend Peter Appleyard gave to me. I don't know if you know Peter or not. We lost him a couple years ago. He was a fabulous vibraphone player from England who had lived in Canada for many years. And Peter used to come to Florida every so often and do concert dates with my big band, which was doing a tribute to Benny Goodman. And Peter had spent a number of years playing with Benny's small groups, and he was quite a showman as well as being a great vibe player. And I had an arrangement in my book that he really liked, and he had this arrangement, which I really liked, so we swapped them. And that particular spot sounds to me, I think that was done last year. We were playing a Battle of the Bands with the Glenn Miller Orchestra at the Montreal Jazz Festival. And I believe that's where that recording came from.
That was great. And I love big band. My grandfather played in the big bands back in the 40s, and I actually went to school for music education. I started on clarinet and eventually changed over to saxophone, which I haven't played in years, but it was my favorite instrument. And so I kind of grew up loving that big band music. What was your inspiration for the big band? How did that become, is that your favorite style? You play all styles?
I play all styles of, I shouldn't say I play all styles of jazz because there are so many different styles, and I certainly don't do them all. I've spent a lot of time playing small groups, quartets, quintets, sextets. I've, for many years, traveled, have continued to do so with wonderful trombonist Bill Allred and his 8-piece group. But there was always something about big bands, and it's kind of funny. The first time I ever heard a big band in person, I think I was 12, and I went by myself to the KRNT Theater in Des Moines, and I saw the Guy Lombardo Orchestra. And when Guy was still alive, and his brothers Carmen and Lieber were still in a band, and I had never heard a big band live. Now, obviously, as time marched on and my exposure to big bands became much more varied and extensive, that wasn't exactly the band that I would pick out, although it was a great band. And I heard that band live, and I just thought this was something. So at that point in time, in the early to mid-'50s, just about all of the big bands made their way through Des Moines, either playing at concerts at the KRNT or playing at the Valair Ballroom, and I made a point to get up front and close and listen to every one of them. I heard Woody Herman's band, Ralph Martiri, Buddy Morrow, whom later became my dearest friend. I think I might have mentioned, I saw Count Basie. I'll never forget when Count Basie came, and this was 1956, and he had one of his all-time great bands. Sonny Payne was still in the band, Joe Newman, Thad Jones, Marshall Royal, Frank Foster, Frank West. It was just an all-star. And Freddie Green, of course, was still going strong. And my buddy and I, a trumpet player, we probably bought the first 2 tickets as soon as they went on sale. And we were sitting front row and center, and we, I had played quite a few times in the KRNT Theater, and I knew the facility really well. And so we were sitting an hour before the show, and I heard the guys in the Basie band warming up backstage. And I said to my friend, let's go back and maybe we can get some autographs. So we snuck the side door to get backstage. And the next thing you know, I hear some guy going, "Hey, what are you kids doing?" And it was Sonny Payne. And Sonny had a reputation for being a little gruff, but I have to say, in retrospect, he was really nice to us. And especially, I'm trying to be cool, and I said, "Oh, that's okay, man. We're musicians, and we just came back to see you guys." And he goes, "Oh, is that a fact? Well, did you want to get some autographs?" And I'm going, "Oh, yeah." So he took us around, and we got everybody's autograph, and then finally he says, "Would you like to meet the old man?" And I said, "Yeah." So he goes over to Count Basie's dressing room, knocks on the door, and I hear, "What?" And he goes, "Hey, Bill, a couple of local musicians like to talk to you."
Wow.
So we opened the door, and we went in, and Count Basie was so nice to us. I don't recall what he said. I know I have no recollection of what I said, but I always remember how very nice and genuine he seemed to be. And in years that have gone by, I think that's been affirmed that he was a real gentleman and one of the really good guys. But, that was the kind of thing. And every time the bands would come to the Valor Ballroom, you just had to get in. You didn't have seats, so I'd have my chin hanging right across the edge of the stage and hearing every big band. And I just fell in love with that genre. I loved the power and the precision. He was a great soloist, and I would buy big band albums as well as other kind of records, but particularly the big band albums. I would just wear them out. I knew all the charts by heart. And I've never lost that love for the almost organic life that a good big band has. It's just something that grows on you.
Well, we're gonna play another clip.
Okay.
All right.
Don't forget your hat, leave your worries, leave them on the doorstep. Life's sweet, just direct your feet to the sunny, sunny side of the street.
All right, tell us a little bit about that clip. That was great.
Well, that's, what I get to hear every night. And, the tail end of our theme song and the tail end of Opus 1 and Sunny Side of the Street. I was talking to some folks in Australia last night. We're doing a tour down there with the Dorsey Band. We leave on the 7th of September, and we go through October 11th playing in Australia. So I've been doing a series of interviews with newspaper and radio people there. And one of the questions that commonly comes up is, do you get tired of hearing these same old hits? and my answer to them is absolutely not. I've been playing that music for a long time in the saxophone section when Buddy Morrow had the band. And one of the things that I love about the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra is the validity of the arrangements. Songs that were arranged in the late 30s and early 40s still have justifiable existence because they were so well done and they stand the test of time. So I never get tired of them.
Well, I'm going to jump in there. Now, I understand what arrangements means, but say to just our listeners, what do you mean by arrangements?
The arrangements are the notes that a person writes down for all of the people in the band to play so that they stay together. Hopefully we'll start together and finish together. and everything in between will make some sort of sense. Actually, what I have to avoid is sometimes our vernacular for arrangements is we call them charts. And so when I'm talking with a lay person, I have to be careful to use the word arrangements rather than start talking about our book or our charts because that means nothing to them. But I think most people understand that when you're trying to coordinate the musical activities of a large number of people, you have to have some guidelines, and obviously that's what the arranger does, is to establish those guidelines. He tells the first trumpet player as well as the second, third, and fourth trumpet players which notes to play and when to play them, and same with every other instrument in the band. And the final product of that is hopefully a treatment of a song that's pleasing to the ear. And some guys are better at it than others.
Okay. Now, you travel quite a bit, because I got you a couple days ago, and you were not back in Florida. What is it like to travel so much all the time?
Well, it all depends on the travel. Obviously, where you're going and what you're doing while you're there. Sometimes we'll say that, let's say that we have to go make music in some really out-of-the-way, hard-to-reach place, but yet we're playing music with our friends that we enjoy playing with, and we'll say, we're playing for free. They pay us to travel. But it's not always like that. And I've always, I guess maybe because of, again, going back to my youth, living on a farm in Iowa, when I was a little boy, about 6 or 7 years old, my dad gave me a globe, and I memorized where all the countries in the world were, at least at that time, 1947 or so. And my dream was to visit all of those countries. And I love traveling. I love seeing other places. I'm not necessarily a tourist. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to just jump into whatever tourist activities are available in a given different place. But I do kind of like to just meet the people and sample the different kinds of food and just kind of absorb the culture rather than worrying about landmarks. And, every time I'll come into a new country that I've not visited before, I'll be looking out the plane window as we approach the runway, and I'm going, thanks, Dad, for bringing that saxophone home. You got me another shot of my dream, getting to see another part of the world.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Tell me about some of the less common countries that you've traveled to.
Less common. What do you mean by that, Laurie?
Well, not as long. Not, for example, you've probably traveled. You said Australia. You've probably been to Italy, Spain. Any smaller countries?
Well, I just this past year I revisited Iceland. I was there about 89 or 90, something like that. And back in June, we did a cruise with the Tommy Dorsey band where we left New York and went to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we were supposed to stop in St. John's, Newfoundland, but the weather wasn't conducive to that. But then we went on up to Iceland and made 2 stops there, and I got to revisit Reykjavik, which is a really unique little city, very clean, very nice, interesting people. And I would have to say that's one of the more unusual, just because here's a country which is called Iceland, and it's sitting on active volcanoes. It's kind of hard to think of it as totally ice, and it really isn't. Other than that, I think one of the more unusual was I got to do a cruise one time in Brazil. Now, I've been to the major cities of Brazil, but in this particular cruise, I started way up in the northwest part of the country and spent 6 days floating down the Amazon River, and that was something I never thought I would see.
You've done everything. It sounds like. Are there certain countries where big band is more popular? It's like, does Germany love big band more than other countries?
Yeah, the irony is that the big band, as we know it, is an American product, and is probably less well received as a rule in the United States than it is in almost every other country we travel to. Last fall, for example, in winter, we spent 3.5 weeks in Quebec. And I have to tell you, every night and every venue we played had a curtain. We would be set up behind the curtain waiting for the announcement to start. and you could feel the energy coming through that curtain from the anticipation that those people had for the big band. And they were so into it, they even laughed at my jokes, even though I don't think they could understand a word of English in some cases. But just the reception, standing ovations during the night at intermission and a couple of other places, as well as at the end, we would just turn around and say, my God, the worst night we had in Quebec was probably better than any night we've had in the States for a long time. And I know that I've played not with this band in Europe, but with other different groups, with Bill Allred's group and other all-star groups in Germany and Switzerland and Holland and places like that, and Denmark. And the response has been just absolutely so amazing when you go to other countries. I don't think most people in America realize the veneration with which American jazz is held in other parts of the world. It's really one of our greatest contributions to world of art, and it is regarded as such in other countries.
Well, I want you to stay with us. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break. I've got a lot more questions for you. Hi, this is Laurie Zoock, radio host from the world of Laurie Zoock. I was so nervous about getting tattooed, but after doing my due diligence and checking out companies and artists, I had my tattoos done by Justin Dubois of Suncoast Tattoos. He is knowledgeable and artistic, and he gave me a beautiful tattoo, and he put me at ease before, during, and after the process. I just love my new tattoo. Go get your tattoo at Suncoast Tattoos. Call them at 727-575-7935 today. That's 727-575-7935. Or go to suncoasttattoos.net. Are you looking for an affordable way to advertise to thousands of consumers nationally? If you own a business and didn't think you could afford radio advertising, you need to call me, Laurie Zoock, host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. My show reaches thousands of people on 29 AM and FM stations nationwide, as well as through the internet. Additionally, your commercials will also be heard on my podcasts and throughout social media sites. Don't wait another minute. Call me at 813-777-4908, 813-777-4908, and let me bring your message to the nation and help you gain more exposure. Welcome back to the world of Laurie Zoock. If you're just tuning in, I have a special guest today. He's Terry Myers. He's the band leader of the Tommy Dorsey Band. Played clarinet, saxophone, incredible musician. And we've been talking about big band. And so now, leading kind of back in on this segment, Terry, when you're performing, is it mostly the older crowd? And do you get younger kids who are interested into big band, kind of like when you were as a kid?
Well, our crowd generally is much older because it's nostalgia music for the greatest generation and maybe some of their children. But one of the things that saddens me is that a lot of music appreciation has been taken out of the schools, and so kids unless they're actually in the school band program, have very little exposure to this kind of music. And the funny thing is, once in a while, for whatever reason, kids will come to one of our concerts, and I generally will go out front and talk to people at the end of the show, and the kids are very excited. They have never heard anything quite like it, and are really blown away with how great it sounds, even though they really don't have anything to compare it to. They just haven't heard it, but they do appreciate the power and precision of it. And unfortunately, this is not what they're going to hear on radio, and it's not what their friends are going to be listening to. So it's kind of a catch-22 in terms of getting the music to them.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you. I mean, I was fortunate. I grew up in the New York metro area, so my family exposed me to a lot of music, especially having a grandfather who was a musician. I heard a little bit of everything. And you're also right. Nowadays in the schools, most of them, especially in the South, they don't even have music programs. And I think that's a great loss for the potential creative minds. And that part of it to me is kind of sad. But now I want to talk a little bit, because you're in Orlando area. You also did a tribute to Benny Goodman at Busch Gardens. So how did you end up doing that?
Well, I was on the road with Buddy Morrow and the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. And one time we were doing a cruise, and the man at that time who was doing the vast majority of the Dorsey band's booking was an agent by the name of Wayne Hutchison. He lived in Sarasota. He had formerly been with the Willard Alexander office in New York, and he really knew how to route a band. He kept the band busy 40 to 45 weeks out of the year. But anyway, on this particular cruise, he came up to me one day and wanted me to have lunch. He wanted to discuss something with me. And so we sat down for lunch, and he said, here's what I'm thinking about. He says, I need a good tribute to Benny Goodman band, because, Benny would not allow a ghost band. And your listeners, in case they don't know, a ghost band is exactly what I'm doing now. I lead the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, and obviously Tommy has long been gone, but it's our job to perpetuate that great music. Well, Benny just didn't want that, because he just felt that whomever would do it wouldn't hold to his particular standard of perfection. So there were a lot of people putting up tribute to Benny Goodman bands, but Wayne needed one in this area of Florida which he could book. And I said, well, where'd you get the idea I could do it? Because I'm more of a saxophone player than a clarinet player. And he said, well, Buddy Morrow says you're the guy. And I said, well, I appreciate Buddy's faith, I'll think about it. Well, that was in 1990. And a couple of years later, I was on the road with Buddy again, and I get a call from Wayne, and he says, Buddy says you're coming home from this tour. I'd been out for about 3 months or 4 months. He says, Buddy says you're coming home on the 1st of September or thereabouts. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, great. I have your tribute to Benny Goodman booked into Busch Gardens on October 1st. And I swallowed hard, and I said, well, okay. And, well, from the road, and bear in mind, we didn't have cell phones then. So I'm, trying to make phone calls from my hotel rooms, trying to find arrangements, trying to hire guys. And the arrangements that I managed to round up were sketchy and bad at best. And a bunch of the players that I wanted to use were busy that weekend, so I was at a second-tier level of players. And I had a chance for one rehearsal, and I think I had 5 sub-players in the rehearsal. So the product that I took to Busch Gardens on that very first day was not stellar, to say the least. But as I'm Irish, and I had a really good break that day because, first of all, the guy who hired us had the flu and wasn't there. And secondly, they had a monsoon in Tampa, and there must have been maybe 50 people in the park. And in the amphitheater at the Stanleyville Theater, which we were playing, it was fogged. You couldn't see to the second row from the stage. And we muddled our way through that program, and there were probably 30 people there to hear it at best. And, well, to make a long story short, the talent buyer at Busch Gardens felt so badly because of what had happened to us. He told the agent he'd like to give us another shot coming up in February. Well, now I had a chance to get my arrangements in order and to get the guys that I wanted and have a couple of rehearsals. And we went back to work there in February and did really well. But I'm always thinking, you know, if that guy hadn't had the flu and if it hadn't rained like it was monsoon season, that would have been the first and last gig forever for the Terry Myers tribute to Benny Goodman. But as it turned out, it was a nice 20-year run.
And worked out perfect.
It did. It worked out absolutely perfect. I've always been lucky.
Oh, spread some luck over here. I could use your luck. You know, and I know, you know, I read a little bit about you. I know you've performed with Bob Hope, The Temptations, Tommy Tune, Ray Charles, Regis Philbin, and Kathy Lee Gifford and Wayne Newton. Can you describe your experiences performing with some of them, or maybe share some stories?
Well, yes. You know, I got to tour some with Wayne Newton, and it was always a first-class operation. You know, he carried his own tech crew, sound and lights and everything. So whenever you go into a new theater to play, the sound check would take maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and most of that involved getting Wayne's mic just the way he liked it. But good musicians all around, and, you know, good conditions, first-class, five-star hotels and all of that, compared to some of the traveling I've done where, you know, we got to know every Motel 6 in the country, but and I don't mean to offend Motel 6 owners, but some are great and some are not so great. And but, you know, Bob Hope was one that I remember kind of tragically. I only worked with him actually one time, and it was at the Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob was getting well into, it was probably only about 3 years or so before he passed away. I don't know. It was towards the end. But he was starting to have some bouts of dementia at that time and was having a really, really, really hard time remembering anything. And I can remember being in rehearsal and hearing his wife, Dolores, backstage going, "Oh, my, why does he do this? He doesn't need to do this." Well, he needed to do it because it's all he'd ever known how to do, you know.
Right.
But I remember him going over to his musical director between jokes and getting prompted on what the next joke would be, and then he would walk back out to center stage and tell the joke, and people would go crazy, and then he would walk back over to his conductor and get a cue for the next joke, and go back out and tell it. But meanwhile, I was feeling so badly for him because I knew it was probably beyond the time that he should have been working.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest thrills for me ever was to play with Ray Charles. And we used to do it in an orchestral setting with a 40-piece orchestra. And I would play clarinet on some of the things, and then we would have a full sax section on some of the things. But I was sitting maybe 15 to 18 feet away from Ray Charles where I could see him and hear him. And I remember telling his conductor, Victor Vanacore, one time, I said, you know, in some ways I regret playing these concerts with Ray because every song that he does, he owns it. I don't want to hear anybody else, myself included, do these tunes anymore because once I've been that close involved in the situation and hearing Ray right up close singing these songs and playing them in his own fashion, but particularly his own vocal style, I just don't want to hear anybody else do them. He has just absolutely taken that song away from the world and made it his own. And I don't know if I've ever worked with anybody else that I could say had that much of an impact. And, you know, another thing, a lot of times you'll work with performers and their rap with the audience, I don't mean it in a musical sense, I mean their conversation with the audience will quite often wander off onto their life and what they're doing and what they've got coming up and so on and so forth. With Ray Charles, it was never anything but the music. He would come on stage. His valet would lead him on stage while we played him on. He would sit down at the piano, and he would start to sing and play. And when that song was over, he'd wait for the applause to die out, and then he would go in to the next song. And he would do an hour and 15-minute show or so and never say a word, and yet have everybody in the entire room absolutely enthralled with the music they were hearing. And the thing, his conductor was telling me that Ray's daily routine was he had his own studio, and every morning by 5:30 or 6 o'clock, he was in that studio practicing, writing, working on music. And it literally, at that stage in his life anyway, which was the last 10 years or so that he was alive, and I probably worked with him a dozen times, and he'd always come up with there'd be a new arrangement of some kind on some great song. And he just absolutely was so immersed into the music that I realized how genuine he was, and maybe the most genuine artist I've ever encountered.
Yeah, that's a truly amazing story. I mean, that's very heartfelt. But what I do want to do, because I want to have a little bit of time, I want to play another audio clip of yours. Now, Terry, that's you playing Pennies from Heaven.
Yes, I recognize that. And that's with Jeff Phillips on keyboard and Eddie Metz Jr. on drums.
Now, I want to bring up something. We have a mutual friend, Glenn Zatola.
Oh, yeah, what a wonderful musician.
Yes, he is, and he speaks highly of you as well. Now, he always, whenever I speak with him, he always talks about singing through the horn. Can you explain what that means to people? I know what that means, but a lot of non-musicians do not know what that means.
Well, I think, and I've never discussed it in exactly that term with Glenn, but I think what he's talking about is that he and I both particularly like to listen to people who have a melodic approach to the way they play. And that melodic approach has to respect the original song upon which you're improvising. To the extent, for example, if you use the great tenor saxophone player Stan Getz, Stan wouldn't play a ballad unless he knew the lyrics to the song, because he felt that everything that he was going to play needed to impart the meaning of that song. So as if you just are playing on a set of chord changes with some reference to the melody, I always liked Buddy Morrow used to use the phrase, if we'd be talking after a gig and he'd go, "Man, you were telling a story tonight," and what we mean is you construct a solo almost in a conversational way, in that some guys who have wonderful technical proficiency might start from point A to point B by trying to dazzle you with the technical facility that they may possess, but in the process, maybe they don't say anything to you. Maybe they don't tell you anything. Maybe they don't even stop to breathe. And this is where Glenn and I think, are really, really in simpatico, is that we both believe when you're listening to a true artist, they're painting pictures for you, oral pictures that you can almost visualize. And I think that's what he means by singing through the horn, and I subscribe to that completely.
Okay. Now, do you have other family members that are musicians also?
No immediate family members, but I had a cousin, Don Ellis, who had the Don Ellis Big Band. Unfortunately, Don died way too young. He was about 44 years old. But he recorded a number of albums on Columbia. He wrote the music for the movie The French Connection. And his orchestra, Don first came to prominence playing in the trumpet section with Maynard Ferguson back in Maynard's Birdland Dream Band. But Don grew up in Minneapolis. His father and my mother were first cousins. And we didn't know each other very well. We corresponded, and we met a few times. But I was always very proud of Don because he had an orchestra, a big band, by the way, which was playing all sorts of Eastern European and even Middle Eastern and Asian rhythm patterns. He hardly ever played anything in 4/4. He played in tempos of 7/4, which means a quarter note gets one beat, and you have 7 of them in a measure, and that's very foreign to the American ear. Most people in this country, when they think of odd meter, will think of Dave Brubeck's Take 5, which is 5 bars. 5 quarter notes to a bar. But that was probably the mildest thing that Don did. He had 11/8, 27/8, and the band just played the heck out of him. He had a whole bunch of like-minded players, and I asked him one time, I said, Don, you ever play anything in 4/4? And he laughed and he said, oh, once in a while, but it's difficult. I try to think of it as the traditional 5/4 with the last beat left off. But then I have another cousin who's more known as a TV actor, Bill Daly, who was on the Bob Newhart show with Suzanne Plachette.
Mm-hmm.
He was the goofy navigator that lived next door.
Oh, yes.
And Billy and his mother and my mother are first cousins. He's in Ellis. My mother was in Ellis. And all the musical talent that I may possess, I believe there's a lot of genetics that goes into having a proclivity for something artistic, particularly in music. And it just kind of ran through the family. But anyway, Bill Daly, before he was known as a television actor and comedy writer, was a wonderful string bass player.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
Yeah, in fact, around Chicago, they used to call him the White Ray Brown. He was very, very, very good bass player. And I think after he retired from, and I haven't seen or talked to Bill in years and years, since I was really very young. But my mother used to stay in touch with him, and after the Newhart show was over, he moved to Albuquerque and I think just started playing bass again for his own amusement. But he was a great bass player. And then my great-uncle John Ellis had a family band. Everybody in the family played. And I have a first cousin by the name of Tommy Ellis, whom I haven't seen in 50 years. And I'm told that he's playing in some country western band in the Los Angeles area and is supposed to be a hot guitar player. But I haven't seen him in forever. But anyway, on the Ellis side of the family, there's a lot of it.
It sounds like it runs in the family. How did you land the job as Tommy Dorsey's band leader? And would you say it's your dream job?
I would say so. I never think of it in terms of my dream job, but I guess it would rank right up there. I started playing with the band back in the mid '80s. I never played, on the road for years with the band like a lot of my friends did, because I started playing with it when I became really well acquainted with Buddy Morrow. Buddy lived in Maitland, Florida, as did I. And actually, Buddy introduced me to my wife. And we'll be married 30 years this coming January. And Buddy and his wife, Carol, introduced us. And at that time, I only barely knew Buddy because when he would come back to Central Florida, occasionally he'd have an occasion to put together a big band just on a pickup basis, and I played with him a couple of times like that. And then one night he came into a club where I was playing, and I went over to say hi to him, and the next thing I know, he was tapping me on the shoulder asking me if I was married, and I said no, and he pointed out the beautiful lady sitting with his wife and thought I would be interested in her, and I sure was. So anyway, one thing, 6 months later, we were married, and then whenever Buddy would come home, we would hang out together because we lived a half a mile apart, and he needed somebody on our side of town that he could relate to, and I was the only one he knew. So as the years went by, we became closer and closer, and then every so often Buddy would call and say, hey, I need you on the bus. Can you come out and play Barry for a month? Or can you come out and play second alto for a few dates? Or can you come out and play lead alto? So I ended up playing every chair in the sax section at one time or another. And all through that time, from 1992 on, this started in 86, but sometimes even we did some cruises where they'd have big band cruises on the SS Norway, and we would have both of our bands on there. And we really enjoyed the back and forth between our two bands. But Buddy really, I think, and indicated to me, he said, someday this will all be yours.
And now it is.
And he was really grooming me, I think, to replace him in the long run. And I was honored to do so. And so, when you talk about a dream job, here I am in the enviable position, I think, of keeping the music of the great Tommy Dorsey Orchestra going. But equally important is keeping the legacy of my dear friend Buddy Morrow alive, because he was one of the greatest trombone players of all time and one of the best band leaders. I think if you talk to anybody that played in either Buddy's own band or his version of the Dorsey band, there was a genuine love that came from his players and a respect for him as a band leader. And I really try to maintain that. And we pay homage to Buddy every night. We always close our show with Night Train.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Now, Terry, is there a website or a phone number somebody can reach you at if they want to look more into your band?
Well, as far as the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, they can just go to BuddyMorrowProductions.com, or they can go to the TommyDorseyOrchestra.com, and they can keep tabs on us that way. My own phone number I'll give out is this is my landline, 407-331-0626.
Great. Thank you very much. It's been a real honor to have you on the show. And we're going to actually go out with some more of your music. So thank you again.
Thank you, Laurie.